All right, and welcome, Sparkles.
Hello, everyone. It is me.
Okay, it is Sparkles, aka Spookles, because,
Yeah.
Halloween. Sparkles, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Who are you? What is your relationship to Refold and the language learning community?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sparkles. I'm a moderator on the Refold JA server, on the Refold EN server, and on Refold Central. I'm mostly active on Refold JA. Not so much recently. I've taken a little bit of a break from Discord. I'll come back soon. But yeah, I started studying Japanese technically almost 10 years ago in 2014 as a freshman in high school. I started doing immersion right when I graduated high school in late 2018. I managed to move to Japan with an engineering job. So here's my ID. This is the character art that's in my all my profile pictures and stuff. So I figure I show proof that I am here.
Perfect. So yeah, your claim to fame, as far as I know, is that you started learning Japanese, and now you have succeeded. You have moved to Japan, and you're working in a Japanese environment for a Japanese company.
Correct.
Using Japanese.
Correct.
So you didn't move to Japan as like an English teacher or something. You moved there to be, an engineer, doing engineering in Japanese.
Yeah, I'm doing software development for a major automobile manufacturer that you know the name of. I'm not going to name specifically.
Okay, I can guess. Does it start with a T?
You're close.
Okay. So what is it like working in Japan for those of us who are interested in eventually, moving to Japan and experiencing J life?
Yeah, for sure. So the big stereotype that I think scares a lot of people away is all the infamy around Japanese work culture and the amount of hours they work, the amount of drinking parties they do, and is this kind of an image of never being able to go home. My experience so far is that has not been the deal at all. I actually have more time off at this job than I did at my previous job in America. There's a thing called Burakakigyo. You have black companies that do that kind of thing, and there's like a whole problem with it. I'm not going to downplay the problem because young men enter these companies, and then these companies, they have a whole thing they go through to just like slowly train them into being like their work slaves and just working forever. But it's getting better. The government's been passing a lot of laws around that. My company has a work union, and it's been pretty fine. At my company right now, in my department, the average amount of overtime that's being worked is 30 hours per month. I'm working less than that, and they're actually actively trying to reduce that because they want to move the whole culture more to be more like the rest of the world. So if you work for a non-Japanese company, you probably have a better chance of getting like a no overtime environment, but it kind of depends on what you want. It's a little different too, because in America, at least in my previous job, a salary was a salary. You didn't get extra pay for doing overtime unless it was like an extreme situation. They approved it. But in Japan, you're legally paid for all of your overtime, and you get like 30% more baseline for your off time hours. And there's like extra time over that if you work like overnight or if you work a holiday or something. So it's been pretty nice. Culture-wise, it's been a little different. Where do I even start? There's so much to talk about that it's like difficult to like even know where to begin. But yeah, it's not proper cubes the same way a lot of American offices has, but it's not like I see I've seen pictures of like open office environments where it's literally just like a long table with computers on it, and it's like, here you go, that's a desk. It's like, oh no. But these are decently large. That they are in a line and they're not like walled off like cubes are, but they're decently large to have stuff on, thankfully, because my desk is becoming a growing clump of car electronics and interfaces and computers and servers, and I'm glad I have space or I wouldn't be able to do what I do. But yeah, well, I speak Japanese 95% of the time at that company. There are some people from all around the world, so there is occasionally someone who is better in English. I end up using that, but it's been pretty nice. You know, I'm enjoying Japan. Do you have any specific questions to help me find another thread to go on talking about?
I do. I was just letting you go because, yeah, that was a great little sort of introduction and to Japanese working life. And you mentioned like there is one day a week, I think Fridays, where you can't work overtime, right?
Yeah, that's something they did. It's called a teijibi. It's a 1 day a week where they actually have a set time where where everyone goes home, and it's a no overtime day. So there's all kinds of. It's really interesting, just that culture, because in America it's like you got to convince people to do overtime and do more and more hours, but here it's like they're actively doing things to like try to convince people, hey, it's okay, go home. Please go home.
So
completely opposite.
Yeah, working for a Japanese company, I worked as a contractor doing English teaching for a Japanese company, one of the big conglomerates. You've probably heard of them. They do JAV, they do English teaching, they do salon, they do pretty much everything, gaming. So it's really cool to me because, when I started working for Refold, I was like, okay, a very California company, take time off, take sick days. So it's interesting that your experience working for this famous car company has been totally different.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to like learning Japanese, did you feel that immersion actually prepared you for living and working in Japan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly gets you the most important thing, which is being able to communicate with people. Whether or not it got me prepared for the cultural things, it's kind of hard to say. Like yes and no, because it's like, I don't know, like most of the cultural things I ended up learning at some point or another. But, it may have been from a YouTube video. It may have been from looking things up. It may have not be, directly from immersion. But immersion, I think, is definitely a part of it. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's, like there's a thing that a lot of Japanese do called shore, which is where they have like a specific like morning like not workout, but like they do like morning stretches and stuff, and sometimes they yell. Well, there's like a whole bunch of like YouTube compilations of the Japanese companies doing weird like morning things, but my company doesn't have that. They just have a thing on the intercom that plays in the morning that just says, "Everyone get up, it's time to stretch," and no one does it. But
okay,
yeah.
So
yeah, things like that, it somehow entered my mind at some point or another, but I don't know if I can attribute the credit to that directly to immersion or not. I think at some point it just comes down to having curiosity about the culture that you're interested in. Yeah, and that's what leads you to learning more about it. And of course, through immersion, that often, I think, makes you have more contact and learn more. But,
sure.
It's probably not just an immersion thing, but I don't think it's something that most people will struggle with either.
Yeah, so immersion definitely introduced you to some of the cultural stuff. Language-wise, how did you feel having to output?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because, studying Japanese in America, I only ever heard Japanese through my headphones, or through like my car
common
speakers.
Experience.
Yeah, and I only heard Japan before I moved here. I only heard Japanese actually being spoken by a person in front of me, like a handful of times. Like it, like obviously there was my teacher when I was in university. I took 3 semesters of Japanese then, but I didn't have a strong Japanese level at all coming out of that. And I went to a Japan festival once that had a few Japanese people going around who were speaking. But other than that, I probably only had like an hour or 2 of like genuine like speaking Japanese to someone in front of me experience before I came here. And so yeah, I definitely feel like for me, like listening has always been my weakest part. Like listening is the hardest part of Japanese for me. Like listening is even harder than output for me personally. Sometimes I feel like my output's like almost outpacing my listening. Is just parsing things, like understanding people when there's like a lot of background noise, when the volume quality is not great, when it's low volume. Those are that I struggle a lot with that. And yeah, that definitely took some time to get used to. Like I kind of got here getting better and better at understanding the people in front of me, so I don't have to ask them to repeat themselves so much. Understanding like what the like when you get on the train, the conductor like speaks into the mic, or on the bus, understanding that. Or even just like going down the street and like
I can't always understand like conductors on trains or on the bus in
yeah
English.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I don't really I've ridden the train in the English speaking world. I can't remember whether I understood them or not, but it's not something you do commonly in America.
For sure. Yeah, and I've got some hearing loss, so it's not the easiest thing for me, even in my native language.
Yeah, I have a little bit too. I have a chronic tinnitus problem in my left ear. It's always ringing, and I have a slight amount of hearing loss in it. So that's also a weakness. I think potentially maybe my ADHD like leads to like audio processing problems. I'm not sure, but for me,
there's something called
more of a challenge.
Audio gating, sound gating. There's a whole science behind how we hear sound and process it. So interesting. So you feel like what's harder than output is listening for you? Yeah,
for me, for sure. But it's definitely gotten better slowly but surely. Like no matter how much challenge you may have personally for approaching a language, it's just a matter of putting more time in. And I think for most people,
for each activity,
we can overcome it. It's been 3 months since I've gotten here, and I already feel like things are so much better. I'm not, I'm not struggling anywhere near as much to just understand people day to day. I can, for the most part, understand the trains and the buses now, not perfectly, but certainly enough to get any information I need. And yeah.
All right. And when it came to actually like doing your immersion, how did you prep yourself for the output? Because that's something I see a lot in the Discord servers where they don't organically start outputting the way that we would have expected 2 years ago when Refold first started, So how was that for you, making that output transition? Were you able to do it organically? Did you have to practice? What happened?
It took me a while because, for me, it wasn't just a struggle of the learning to output. I have a lot of social anxiety problems, and like 2 years ago, that was particularly bad. And for me, I actually had to start with just getting used to talking with people I don't know in English again. That's actually the very reason I started speaking on Refold JA so much, because it was just like I was at a point where even just putting a message in a Discord server I've never posted in was something that like took courage, and I had to like build myself up to do. Like I would like at that point I was in a place where like I would play Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, and you'd go into a game and you can't talk to each other, but you can do like character emotes with each other. And like there was this one day where I was playing a deck I hadn't done before, so I was reading my cards, and like this guy was like trying to rush me by like spamming the emotes, and just that feeling of judgment like really like got me for like multiple days. So that's where I was coming from. And so for me, it was like a combination struggle of attacking both social anxiety and output. But I wanted to speak Japanese and move to Japan so bad that it was just like, it was hell, but it was something that I just had to work through. As for the specifics of what I did, I listened to a lot of podcast material. There's this one podcast called Rebuild, which is about it's a Japanese engineer who moved to the US and his experience. So that's certainly, it's like a perfect podcast for me because it's someone speaking Japanese doing the opposite thing that I did.
You find your counterpart.
Yeah, exactly. And I did that, and I just kind of slowly built myself up to talking with people online, finding avenues to do it. What worked for me pretty well specifically is just going into like Discords based around games, because in the Japanese speaking world, there's a lot of people who go in the Discord servers like that, and they don't do mic either because they don't have one, or they live in like a small apartment with really thin walls where they can't really speak loudly. So they're just muted all the time, and they only use text. So I didn't have any problem just jumping into a Discord call that way and writing what I was comfortable with and speaking what I was comfortable with and just doing what I could. And everyone was I didn't have any problems with facing anybody like being who didn't want me around, because it was just like, why you can't speak Japanese? Well, go away. I didn't have any problem with that. Everyone was very welcoming. Everyone was very nice. Japanese people in general are pretty nice, I think, compared to Americans. But
so there's a lot to unpack there. It seems like on one hand you had your own just social anxiety, and that was something to overcome independent of Japanese.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on the other hand, you have the actual act of outputting Japanese. So I always compare immersion and input as going to a beach and recognizing sandcastles, and then output being trying to recreate like a professionally made sand sculpture or sandcastle on your own.
Yeah.
So I also have social anxiety disorder. I'm diagnosed. And I also have COVID was awful for me because, I got to the point where I was not leaving my apartment at all. And I became like a hermit because of the COVID anxiety and stuff. But how about the actual act of putting together and stringing together Japanese? How was that process for you, coming from doing mostly input to where you're starting to output?
The process of actually putting Japanese together, for the most part, it's just a matter of relying on your instincts and having to trust yourself, I think, because it's really easy to just not refuse to say anything because you're not 100% sure what you're saying is perfect, but most of the time people are going to understand you. And goodness, it's difficult to find specific advice about that, because it really is just a matter of just output more. And when you have a lot of input, when you say something that's really right, and the person you're talking to understands what you're saying immediately, that those are the moments where you have that strong positive feedback, both from your input level giving you that positive feedback of that sounds like good Japanese, that just came out of my mouth, and also the external feedback of okay, they clearly understood exactly what I was trying to say. So everything about immersion and learning, it really is just those feedback loops. With input, the positive feedback is, I understood what they said, or I understood mostly what they said, and you just get more input, and you go through that way. Output's just kind of the same way. I think it's just a matter of doing it, and it's really hard to begin with, in the same way that one of the biggest places people has struggled to get over the hurdle of stage one, when you just don't understand anything yet. and it's discouraging, and it's not interesting, and it's just hard to get over. There's sort of this, I think everyone to at least some extent has that same struggle in output, where you have that initial thing to get over, just to get like to the point where you can mostly function. And it varies person to person, but you also add on to the fact that, like, when you fail an input, when you don't understand something, it's just you in your room, it's whatever. But in output, there's actually another human being involved, and when you mess up, it's embarrassing, and you feel like you're troubling someone else. So that definitely adds to the difficulty of the whole thing. But it's just, I don't know, I don't think there's anything to do other than just do more of it and try to find ways
that seems to be the common thread that I'm taking from everything you've said, is if you're struggling, just do more of it.
Yeah, I guess.
If you're struggling with listening, listen more. If you're struggling with speaking, speak more. So that seems to be the common thread. Yeah, and did you do anything like in your, output can be done with people. That's like the typical sort of way of doing it. But a lot of refolders, even like the official like coaching curriculum, we recommend outputting by yourself. Like practicing shadowing and chorusing, and practicing, journaling, practicing monologuing. Did you do anything like that, or did you just jump straight into output with like natives?
Yeah, I monologued with myself every day when I showered, and I did a lot of times where I would record myself just speaking. Most of the time I didn't listen back to the recording, because for me it was more the point of just putting a topic in front of me to speak about and just doing my best to speak about it. And the judgment wasn't whether I was pronouncing it perfectly or anything. It was just the fact that I could speak. And in hindsight, part of me feels like, I don't think it was no gains from that output, but I think the largest contribution to that was just like, the confidence it gives you, because it's just like, okay, I put up this topic, I just let myself speak Japanese, and I managed to go for like a half hour. So I guess I can speak Japanese. It's just a matter of doing that same thing in front of natives and learning to enjoy it, so.
And do you enjoy output now? Do you just enjoy having conversations in Japanese?
I certainly enjoy talking to my friends. I don't think I was ever the kind of person who just enjoys talking a lot in general. Yeah, just for the sake of it. I enjoy talking to people that I find interesting and that I have an affiliation with, like I have an affinity for. So yeah.
Were there any like shocks or surprises when it came to outputting face to face versus outputting over Discord chats?
There's some small things here and there, just like greetings that, like, once I experienced in the real world, I felt like I clicked in me in a way I didn't know before. Little things like that. I wouldn't say it was anything super, like, absolutely major.
Okay.
But
all right, so let's shift gears here and back on actually getting employed in Japan. What can you tell us about that? So did you need to pass a test for your visa? How was the whole process of applying for a job? Things like that.
So the process for me was I got hired. They sent me the hiring notice. I accepted it, and then they referred me to a lawyer. And I messaged the lawyer over email. He sent me a bunch of stuff to sign, and I sent that back along with a whole bunch of documents I needed to send him. And I know he contacted my company on the other end and got whatever he needed from them. And then he put in the application like the Japanese Immigration Bureau. And in 4 to 5 months, I had what's called a certificate of eligibility, the Zaidu Skakuso Meso. And the certificate of eligibility for what I have, it requires a 4-year degree most of the time. I think there are other ways to get it. I think there's certain certifications they'll accept. It might vary from field to field. In my particular case, if you want to do what I do, you want to go be an engineer, chances are you're probably going to need a 4-year degree. But other than that, it's just a matter of being able to go. So in 4 to 5 weeks, I had that COE, the certificate of eligibility. And then I had to put in the actual application for the work visa. So I had to call the consulate that was closest to me, the consulate of Japan. And I called them by number, and they answered in Japanese. And at the time that caught me off guard for some reason. I don't know why. It was just like calling a US number and hearing Japanese. But I got through that, and I had to mail them, proof of where I lived and a whole bunch of stuff, and the filled out application, a copy of my COE, and my passport. I actually had to take my actual passport and put it in in a USPS like express envelope and send it off, which was super uncomfortable. But that's a lot faster. In about a week, it got back to me. I pulled it out. Only the passport was in there, so I was like freaking out. I was like, did I get rejected? And I opened up, started looking through it, and it was there, pasted in the page of my passport. It's like a big old thing. I got the amount they'll give you, like in terms of length of stay, it can range from I think 3 months at the shortest, up to 5 years. I've heard 1 year is the most common for the first one. I don't know if it was because my company has full or something, or how it works, but but they gave me 5 years. So I had that, and after that I just flew to Japan. On the line through, I showed them my visa. They asked for my COE. I gave them my actual original copy of my COE, and then they gave me the Zaidu Kado, the immigration card, the little plastic thing that's in my wallet right now. So that's what the actual immigration process was like.
Did you need any proof of your Japanese ability? Did you need to pass a JLBT or anything?
No. It's possible maybe that helped with the visa process, because I know that's counts towards your points for your qualification if you want to be a citizen or if you want permanent residence. But I wasn't asked for proof of my JLPT at any point. They just kind of believed me. I got through all the interviews in Japanese, and they were just like, all right, you're fine. But yeah, I don't think so. If you wanted to come to Japan without speaking Japanese, I think you absolutely could do it. If you want to come as an engineer, if you go to Japan Dev or Tokyo Dev, there's a lot of positions that require no Japanese, or only require some basic Japanese to qualify for. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do, especially if you have one of the skills that are, if your background is in something that's particularly desired here, that's really common. If you're a mobile app developer, if you're a web developer or something, then there's a lot of jobs for that. But in my case, my background is in simulation. I made army simulators for 4 years before I came to Japan, and now I'm here working for a car company making simulators to test the safety systems loaded on the computers that are in cars. I take those computers, I hook them up to a bunch of cables and stuff, and run simulations to see if it sends the signal back that it's supposed to when I make it believe it's about to run into another car or something. That's what I do. So I managed to find my niche, the place that lined up really well with my history, and that's the path I ended up going. I'm not a typical web or app developer. So you're still muted.
That's very cool. So it sounds like, you've wanted to be in Japan for a long time. You knew this 10 years ago when you were in high school, and you finally realized your dream. Did anything surprise you? Was anything about Japan different? Was there culture shock that you were not expecting, even though since you're an immersion learner, you probably should have expected a whole bunch? Were there still things that have thrown you off?
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that I think, little things that you wouldn't have expected. The trash system caught me off guard here because, thinking about it almost makes America seem a little pitiful, but the trash system is very complex here. You separate things out from paper to different kinds of plastic. There's two main types of plastic, the regular and then the PET, which is what plastic bottles and stuff are. There's burnable trash and non-burnable trash. So you have to, and for my apartment where I take out my trash, it's, depending on the day, it's what trash you're picking up. So I have to keep track of that and keep everything separated. And it's just like, man, Japanese people, they come home, and there's not many trash cans around in public for that reason. Everyone takes their trash home and then takes care of it. So it's just like, man, Japanese people are taking their bottles home, washing them out, taking off the label, taking off the cap, putting the cap and label in one thing and the plastic bottle itself in another thing, and doing all this. And in America, we can't even handle just trash recycling. Everyone just like, just throwing their plastic bottles into the landfill trash because whatever. It's just like, man. So yeah, that was the one off the top of my head. There's all kinds of little things.
Yeah, sometimes it's the little things that get you.
Yeah.
All right. And Sparkles, what would you recommend to people who had a similar dream as you? There are people right now who were in your position that you were in 10 years ago, right? There's a lot of high schoolers on the Refold JA server who want to eventually come to Japan. What advice would you give to these people who are like starting the grind where you were 10 years ago?
Yeah, I would say immerse, be consistent, but make sure to prioritize your own career and what you're going to do first. Because just being able to speak Japanese and nothing else doesn't get you anywhere. Japanese is a method. It's not an end skill, essentially. And, a lot of times in immersion servers, people, the stories that are the most celebrated that really catch people's attention are the people who just know life, do nothing but Japanese for, a year and get fluent in that really short amount of time. But what I think is the better way to go about it is, to have a plan. What do you want to use with Japanese? Or do you have a plan and what you want to do with Japanese? Who knows? But focus on what you want to do in life first, as a person, just as, a career, to make sure you're going to be okay. And, the nice thing, particularly about immersion, is that at some point, you're just doing what you love. You're playing games that you would want to be playing anyway. You're watching shows that you would want to be watching anyway. You're just doing it in Japanese and getting gains in the meantime. So, having a slow, steady approach while you make sure that your actual life is on track, I think that's the most important thing. For me personally, I wish I knew about this when I was in middle school and I first had the thought, I really want to learn Japanese, but had no idea where to even begin or what to do with that. But, at the end of the day, it worked out. Because I got through college, I got a job and started a career. And over 4 years of working full time, I managed to get the Japanese level I have and managed to get this, what I think is a pretty neat job over here, and worked it out. So, it's not, on a lot of levels, it's not just, can you speak Japanese? So that's what I would say.
I think that's a pretty common piece of advice that we hear from more grizzled immersion learners, is that you need a skill beyond speaking the language. Speaking your target language is not in and of itself an end skill. Very interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I gotta tell you, that's a pretty cool story, though. I'm impressed. Just the whole journey from being a high schooler interested to building your career and learning Japanese at the same time, and now you're doing a cool job, something that you love in Japan. Sounds like you made it.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, it's been crazy. Like just the fact is like, I did it. Like last year, like I was, you know, well, I quit my last company because I like for a lot of reasons. I was really dissatisfied with the workplace in general, but also there was a lot of overtime, and I felt like I was unable to really like put time towards achieve my dream and coming here. So I took a big risk, and I just quit without an next job and just lived at my grandma's, just focusing on Japanese and focusing on trying to get a job here. And it took me like between the break and the focusing specifically on getting myself ready to start doing the job search in Japanese, and then doing it and finding something that I really liked. It took like a year. And, you know, last year when I was like in the middle of this, it was just like, man, am I gonna make it? Like, is this gonna be okay? Like, it was just like, it was really scary. It was just like, I may be taking a year off from work and putting this job this gap in my career that I got to overcome just to gain nothing. But it all worked out, and I got here, and you know, it's amazing. So it, like, on some level, it's not even just the fact that I got here, it's the fact that like I set this big thing to do for myself and I managed to do it. So, you know, on some level, I think, you know, that's kind of what life is, you know, like, because like there isn't much real financial or career, you know, motivation to learn Japanese and go to Japan. You're not going to make more money doing that. But, you know, it's just something that you personally want and you shoot for, and you grab it.
I am in awe, Sparkles. I gotta say, I'm in awe. You know, the fact that you set your mind to this when you were still in school, when you were a young person, and you finally have attained it all these years later. That's really cool. That's really cool. Lord knows, yeah, Lord knows I change my opinion all the time, and having such a long trajectory and then nailing it. Well, it's wholesome. It's impressive.
It's something that evolved over time. When I was in the original reason I started studying Japanese properly in college was there was this thing called, we had this international engineering minor where you take a few years of a foreign language, you go study engineering for a semester or two in the country of that language just as an exchange student, and you take a couple cultural classes too, and you get a minor out of it. And I wanted to do Japan, and the college that they was set up for this was Saitama University, and they did not offer any engineering classes in English. It was all Japanese, and everyone who went before me, as I was taking these classes and getting ready, were all, you know, they all failed and came back because they couldn't do engineering classes in Japanese. And so they told me I wasn't going to be able to go, and I was devastated. And you know, it was from there that I was just like, I don't know what, you know, I decided I want to go to Japan, and I don't want to go as a tourist. I want to go and like really experience it. And I decided that, but I didn't have like any kind of plan to like know like what exactly I was going to do. And that just kind of shaped up and became what it is today over the years. So
what advice would you give yourself if you were talking to, say, college age you?
Well, I tell them to immerse more, for sure. I tell them read more. You know, back then I just didn't know about immersion. All I knew was, you know, I just looked up a bunch of grammar things online. I did follow a few people on Japanese Twitter, and you know, I would just do my best to read that. The thing that how do I put it? So I did two things that were like really immersion when I was still in college. I read through all of JoJo Part 5 in Japanese because back then there was notoriety. The JoJo Part 5 English translations, this was when there wasn't an anime yet, it was only a manga, were known for not being great. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna shoot for it and try to read it in Japanese. And it was a slow and agonizing process for me back then because I was essentially just doing it intensive at a really low level, just looking up everything and just doing my best. But I got through it and I was really proud of it. And I also played through Breath of the Wild in Japanese. And I found Matt vs. Japan's channel in like late 2017, early 2018, and watched his videos about comprehensible input and all that stuff. And just hearing the argument made it click for me. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Those were the times when I had the most gain. I think this is definitely what I need to do. But at the time, I was in my last year of university, and senior design was making me cry. So I had to figure that out first. So I learned what it was, and I focused on let's just get through school. And then a year later, as soon as I graduated, I was like, all right, all my devices and everything's Japanese now. We're gonna do this. And 4 years later, I got here. So
perfect. That's an awesome story. And now that you work in Japanese, did you have to we talk about domains all the time in Refold. Mm-hmm. Did you ever have to do the office domain? Did you go into Japan knowing the word for stapler, coffee pot, random things like this, shoelace, words that everybody knows but may not come up in immersion?
Surprise, those were, most of those words don't come up very often in immersion. Surprisingly, I think that's one place where maybe studying all the JLPT vocab lists helped me, which is these more IRL words. But I knew the ones that you specifically mentioned, but I wasn't perfect. There were definitely some words to learn, but it was just when you're high level and you approach a new domain, it's just kind of you pick up, the 20 to 50 most common words of that domain as you read it. And, you pick it up really fast, and it ends up not being that bad. The higher level you get, the more domains you get under your belt. Adding another domain, it just gets easier and easier. So when I started working here, there absolutely was that. There was 20 to 50 words I just kind of had to learn, but I didn't have any problem just picking it up on the spot for the most part. It all kind of made sense, especially with kanji. Kanji makes everything a lot easier because it's that's one of the words is shuhou, which is your weekly report. It's that's a whole thing here. It's every week there's a meeting where I report what I did for the week, and then that gets reported up the ladder and all that. So it goes through so I ended up reporting it 3 times and getting feedback each time to specify what I was doing to make it clear for the person up at the top. And that's called shuhou. But it was the shu for that's the same one in a week, and it's the whole that's in hokoku for report. So it's very clear from kanji what it meant and from context too. So there's a lot of words to learn, but they weren't hard to pick up from context.
They were not opaque. They were pretty easy to pick up.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. But Sparkles, we're nearing the end of our hour together. Is there anything that we have not discussed that you wanted to talk about on the podcast?
Not sure. I didn't.
The stage is yours.
I didn't really consider that. Man, I can't think of anything now.
It's okay. There doesn't always have to be something.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate you rescheduling. My CPAP machine broke one night, and then I got no sleep, and I was like, I can't do the interview with Sparkles at 5 a.m. because I have to have my CPAP, otherwise
Oh
I
man, yeah,
wake up
yeah.
15 times an hour. Yeah. Okay. So let me see here. Okay. And tell me, what have you done since you've been there? You've been there for 3 months. You settled into work. Is there anything
Yeah.
cool that you've done? Anything fun, like
Well,
jaywalk?
I got here and I moved into a company dorm, and I was living in the company dorm for about a month. And in the meantime, I was just looking for an apartment and looking for and just enjoying Japan because I was there for the first time. That's something I'm talking about, is finding an apartment. So
Sure.
from the real estate people that I talked to, well, the first time I tried to look for an apartment was actually before I got here, because I wanted to see if it was possible to just get something before I came, and because so I didn't have to move into the company dorm, and that was, one, it was kind of difficult, and two, it not being able to like go and see the place, it is kind of like a demerit from being able to from doing that online over the time. But when I talked to the real estate agent, it was an English speaking one. It was aimed towards foreigners moving in. I told them where I was. I'm not in Tokyo. I'm in a smaller city in the Kanto region, so I can get to Tokyo easily. But I'm not in Tokyo. And I told him where I was, and he was like, "Oh, we're not sure if we're really going to be able to find a place for you here. There's like basically nowhere here that can speak English with you." And I was like, "Oh no, that's fine. I speak Japanese." I was like, "Oh, well, that changes everything." We basically have access to the whole database then. So we did that, but I ended up not getting something before I came because it's like I didn't have a Japanese bank account yet, and I didn't have all these things set up. I would have been really limited for options to just find a landlord who was willing to just have me like use something to just give him money in the meantime until I was there, settled, and had a bank account and was like actually able to do things properly. So I ended up moving into the dorm and looking later, and there's a lot of people say that it's hard to find a apartment as a foreigner, or at the very least that there are some that will deny you simply on the basis of being a foreigner. I didn't have any problem with that whatsoever. That I think for the most part, unless you're in like a really like a country place, a place where like there's the foreigners do not go, I think for the most part, if you can speak Japanese, you're not going to have any problems. But the hard part for me was actually just finding a place that would let me play an instrument that wasn't like out like way far from the station. So I had that requirement, that filter, it was like allows instruments, took hundreds of results down to 6 on the search. So I went through that and I found this place, which is nearby, where my boss leaves, that goes to my work office, and yeah, it works out. I still don't have my guitar. My all my shipment of stuff from America, the boat shipment, is still not here. They said 3 to 3.5 months, and it's been a little over 3.5 months. I might call them again and ask if it's here yet. But yeah, that's what that was like.
All right. Did you have to do anything like key money or anything?
Yeah, it's key. I thought key money was a really funny like English translation for that, because the Japanese is deikin. It's literally just like gift money, and that's literally all it is. You're just giving money to the landlord when you move in. You're just like, here, But key money makes it sound like, oh, this is being used for something. This is important. But yeah, I did have to pay. I had to pay that. There was like an insurance thing I had to pay into, and yeah, but it wasn't too bad. In general, apartments and rent are way more affordable here than they are in America. Like when I left Florida and the city I was living in, I was looking to see what apartments were like in my area, and it was starting at like $1,800, and I was like, oh no, this is terrible. So but the current price I have for, you know, like 90,000 yen. So it's like that's like $800 after the conversion. So it's, compared to that, this is pretty nice, especially for what I get. You know, this is a 1 LDK. It's not like a super small Japanese apartment. And, you know, I'm pretty happy with it. I've got everything I need.
Very cool. Well, Sparkles, thank you for coming on today. And your parting piece of advice, I guess, is going to be immerse more.
Yeah.
Just read more.
Immerse more, but also, you know, make sure your life's order. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a
make
plan.
sure all of your awesome. Again, thank you so much for rescheduling. Thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
And I will see you next time.
See you.
I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold Podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join and chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.
Hey, as you know, there's a lot of language learning advice out there, which can make it kind of overwhelming and difficult to actually get going on your own learning. If you feel like you're struggling to figure out language learning, you're not alone. It's an extremely complicated process with tons of different steps. If you're looking for a step-by-step guide to create the perfect language learning routine for you, then you have to check out our new course. We spent thousands of hours designing a simple and straightforward process that you can use to create your own personalized language routine that actually works. We understand that every learner is different and that you have to roll with the punches and adapt. Every day for 30 days, I walk you through everything you need to know to build an effective learning routine, no matter your circumstances. We give you the advice and resources you need to ensure your success, so you don't have to waste time looking for stuff to do and can focus on learning. And if any questions do come up, don't worry. We are always there to answer any questions and clear up confusion. And it's all backed by our 90-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. If, for whatever reason, something's not quite working for you, we insist you get every penny back. It's time for you to stop wishing that you could learn a second language. It's time to become the master of your language learning journey. Check out the link below to get instant access and start your journey today.